So, good evening, everyone.
Very good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Okay. So, am I audible? Am I clear? My voice is clear to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, just will start. Today, basically, we'll be discussing about uh, an alternative approach to development which emerged very recently, and many of us are familiar with that particular approach. It is called sustainable development, and basically sustainable development means fulfilling the present need or fulfilling the need of present generation without compromising the requirements of future generations. That means there should be the resources should be left for the next generation or for the subsequent generations, and the resources must be protected, and based on that approach, and it should not be overutilized or over exploited, and based on that criteria, this particular perspective was developed. And and actually we'll discuss how actually this particular concept emerged, and how that was that particular approach was implemented and it was applied at the ground level, and who are the stakeholders they were involved in in implementing that particular uh, model. And first, we'll discuss about the micro planning, how micro planning, happens, and how India witnessed micro planning, and what is India's experience with micro planning and development. That we'll be discussing in today's class. And first, if we see, there are two types of model. If you have understood correctly the development discourse of India, you would be knowing how actually this particular, notion of development worked. And we had a number of plan initiatives to channelize India's, or to bring in India's uh, mm, or to make India a kind of developed country. And if we see, it is with the plan initiative, India started uh, India started its developmental journey. Many of you are aware of the India's first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Just a minute. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and what happened? Mm, Initially, many people actually, if you see, they thought that Nehru was pro-rural, and he tried to, he tried to, bring Mahatma Gandhi's vision of India's self-reliance into uh, force. But then gradually, when historians and policy analyst, they started understanding the real reason behind construction of dams, industries. They realized that Nehru had a different vision. And many of you must be knowing there are people those who got associated with Nehru to implement his vision and to make India industrially advanced country. And among them, there are people like P.C. Mahalanobis, Vasan Chandra Mahalanobis, the famous statistician, and who was also included as the head of the planning commission when Nehru was in power, and Nehru was the then prime minister. And if you see, Mahalanobis, who was instrumental in establishing the Indian Statistical Institute at Kolkata, many of you might be knowing. It's a very reputed institution. And but then, how that particular plan worked, right? How planning was working then? Uh, who were the stakeholders uh, participating in the mm, implementation of plans and programs? Can anybody tell me how actually the the initial years of planning phase, how India witnessed development and how that particular policy was for on the how a particular policy got framed and how it got implemented. Any idea?
No, sir.
No. Okay. So basically, if you see, especially with regard to implementing or framing of policies and implementation of policies, you would see actually there are two different approaches. One is top-down approach, okay, and the other one is bottom-up approach. Top-down approach basically means the policies will be framed and designed in the at the top level in a closed door meeting. People of highest stature, they would be playing key role in designing the policy and framing the policy. And there would be another at another level, on the other side, bottom up approach is basically when the policymakers, they go to visit to fields. They collect data from the field. They understand the real problems in the field. Then they involve local stakeholders, especially for example, if you are working on uh, for example, if you are working on an epidemic, or if you are working on a kind of ailment or disease which is prevalent in rural pockets because of problems with the drinking water, then you will have to include the local health experts. Then you have to include the people, those who were the office bearers of local panchayats. Then you will have to include people of that particular locality, and you will have to engage or adopt different strategies to know the actual problem because of which that particular health issues were emerging. So based on that, taking into their concern and consultation, you would go for framing a policy which would ultimately the grassroots population plays an important role in framing that particular policy, and that policy, that recommendation of that particular local people would go up. It will reach finally to, just for an example I am quoting, it would reach actually eventually to the people at the top level. You take the example of, for example, if you are working on a drinking water project, it would go to the Ministry of Water Resources, and there actually they would finalize, and it will go to Chief Minister. Then there will be approval. Then they will go for opening a project which would provide safe drinking water to the entire locality. So, but then see how this particular problem got addressed. This particular problem got addressed because of this bottom up approach. Since the people, those who were actually the target population, they participated in that decision making and in that implementation of or framing of a particular plan and project. But same problem, if you see, in the same problem which emerged in that particular locality, and it got reported in a newspaper, and uh, the government officials, they came to know about, or the minister came to know about the drinking water issues of a particular locality. And what happens, two officials, they will come to the village, they will secretly see, or they might come or they may not, they might come or they might not come. But then sitting in a city, in their office room, they will call for a meeting, and they would say that since many people, they are dependent on the river and pond water, so those polluted waters probably creating pollution in that locality. Since many of the people from in that village, they depend largely on this ponds and river, so we'll go for a plantation of or planting of tube wells, so that they can have actually better, you know, drinking water facility. But what happened, without knowing the villages, that particular village history, that groundwater in that particular village contains lead or any such other kind of pollutant, the government went into digging a borewell. And finally, the people, those who were suffering with some mild infectious disease because of river water, they developed because of since the groundwater contained lead or a harmful material for the kidney. So after consuming that water for a longer time, they you know they developed kidney related ailments. So the problem is, they did not visit the village, they did not consult the people, they did not, just for an example I am telling. So at the end, what happened, by the time government reached people to know exact reason of highest increasing number of deaths due to kidney related ailments, the government realized that the groundwater contains lead, a harmful material for the kidney health. And they could have consulted the people earlier, because local people, they knew that groundwater was not good, because many people, they digged well, and that from while taking water from the well, they realized that water is not safe for drinking. But then this is one of the examples. Similarly, you take the example of Vedanta, which company, industry, which started, its establishing or acquiring land in Niyamgiri area. And what happened when the case went for legal scrutiny in the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court ordered that you cannot detect the localites what is development for them. So basically, you should not come to the court to asking that this project will bring development to them. You rather actually meet the village council or the gram panchayat or the gram sabha, and you ask them whether they are really convinced with your developmental plan or not. If they say yes, you must go for it. If they say no, then you must pay compensation and come back. You cannot establish the company. So finally, the Supreme Court left it to the localites, saying that nobody can explain them the meaning of development better than themselves. The reason is they know their locality, they know their local knowledge, they know their local demand, they know that what is development for them. We should not detect them. So at the end, what happened? The committee which was formed, it came to the village. Then the village gram sabhas in different pockets of the village, different parts of the villages were called. Different parts of that particular panchayat were called. Then finally, the village council decided not to allow Vedanta to establish its company. So they realized that the industrialization is not the only or the whole, is not the whole and soul of development, and choose mm, uh, they chose the alternative path, and they said that we should protect the resources, we should protect the forest, and that is being inside the forest, being the protector of these huge resources available here is the meaning of is the true development in a sense. And basically, the micro planning is used in many different ways, and it is vastly divergent contexts. In fact, the term actually micro planning remains rather vague unless the actual level of planning is defined. Nowadays, more fashionable term is called area planning, is often employed as a synonym of micro planning. In essence, the term microplanning implies multi-level and decentralized planning approach to the overall development of a country. Decentralized planning approach. Now you see, we know that how decentralized governance works. You take the example of a member of Legislative Assembly, MLA, and what happens? The country allocates certain amount for the infrastructural development. Like, for example, this year's budget, if you see, or last year's budget, for example, if you see, the government allocated, for example, uh, 2000 crores for expansion of rural road network, and a particular constituency got 5 crore rupees. Okay. The 2000 crores were sanctioned for expansion of rural road network, and a particular constituency got 5 crore, and but then the government sitting over there did not plan the expansion of road network in a particular locality. Rather, they for sent the amount or deposited the amount or given the amount to the MLA, under the MLA allocation category. In the MLAs, members of legislative assemblies were given the responsibility to identify the actual area for spending those amount, that amount for construction of road. And so decentralization, then similarly the MLA gives certain amount to the sarpans or the panchayat heads. And similarly, they also ask the ward members to identify the pockets where actually they can, uh, you know, they can go for construction of a road or the development of road network. So these things basically, these things usually happen in most cases in a decentralized, uh, when actually the planning is decentralized and implemented, it is implemented in a decentralized manner. Then the aim in micro planning is on planning from the lowest level, which basically means uh, from the functional community upward to a clearly defined region to fulfill the need of the local areas. Okay, and ensuring the process of integration of the different areas. And uh, the local areas remained the prime focus of these particular micro plannings major aim and objective. Then if you see how micro planning in India was started, the first, though it was considered to be first two plans, you know, based on Nehruvian socialist model, uh, it was the planned effort was uh, planned effort in the direction of micro level or regional planning and development uh, became more clear in the third 5 year plan, where actually regional focus in planning became more explicit, and for the first time it gave a serious thought over the problem of regional development. And due to lack of proper national policy with regard to special dimensions of planning, the micro level regional approach to development could not be initiated in the actual planning strategy. And subsequently, there are different 5 year plans, especially mostly in the third plan. The regional focus in planning became more explicit, and for the first time, it gave a serious thought over the problems of regional development. Then, uh, the fourth plan marked a watershed in India's planning by emphasizing the need to strengthen regional development through some kind of micro planning. And for the first time in Indian planning, it stressed upon the necessity to strengthen micro planning at district and lower levels. And the fourth plan initiated micro regional planning from the gross reports from the micro planning from the grassroots, and under the name of area development, taking due note of regional resource potentialities and limitations. Just a minute. So the approach of micro planning is considered as method to bring about integrated area development in the countryside. And microplanning, in its true perspective, attempts to address the emerging socioeconomic problems at various territorial levels. Then how this micro some case studies will discuss about the micro planning. First is the strategy of micro planning is applied in various areas of social concerns. As education is an important component of human development, in this section we shall be examining how micro planning is used for advancement of primary education in India. And as you know, since the education is in the concurrent list, both the central and the state government can make laws on education. Both the central and state governments have been expanding the provision of primary formal and non-formal education to realize the goal of universities of elementary education. And there are projects like community mobilization and participation, then uh, Shiksha Karmi project, Lok Jumbis project. The basically this is the guidelines for this particular program called Lok Jumbis project are a process rather this is a process rather than product approach, and it highly relies on the partnership and decentralized functioning, participatory learning, integration with the mainstream education system, flexibility of management. Then we'll discuss about ecology, environment, and development. Mm, ecology basically means uh, mm, ecology is basically means concern not only with direct response and competition of groups. So basically, I'm asking what is social ecology and composition of groups necessary for the exploitation of natural resources, the direct relationship with spring from the groupings and general. Then uh, we see just a minute. So sustainable development came into picture after the Brundtland Commission in its report defined sustainable development as the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It contains with it two key concepts. The concept need, in particular, is the essential needs of the world's poor, to which overriding priority should be given, and the idea of limitations imposed by the state of technology and social organization of the environment. Then colonial domination and natural resources. As many of us know that the colonial development not only created a kind of dominance over the human society, but also they understood at much early age that exporting minerals would make the countryside or the they'll make the nation uh, poor. And you can see actually how yesterday we discussed how Thane and Mumbai railway line was established to give a false notion, to give the people a false notion that uh, colonialism would bring a kind of prosperity but rather actually the colonial government, if you see, they exploited India to the core, and they commodified land. As if you read the earlier reports of on India's economy, how India was a self-reliant country. It had no option to moving out of rural and agriculture. Uh, but then there will be, problems, and with the collapse of the international colonial structure and the establishment of sovereign countries in the region, this international conflict over natural resources was expected to be reduced and replaced by resource policies guided by comprehensive national interest. But earlier, if you see, during the colonial period, they tried to extract the most rare and costly minerals, and the mineral resources or natural resources required for running of their industries. And if you read the history carefully, you will get to know that how number of mineral resources, number of natural resources were exported to Britain. India's coal mining was opened solely, to entirely to provide or to feed the requirement of coal in the Britain. Then expansion of global market fairs. Development as an ideology that allows the indirect entry of global market domination. It creates the need for international aid and foreign debt, which provides the capital for development for such development projects that commercialize or privatize resources. As I said, uh, the massive involvement of international finance in the economic development of third world countries changes the natural resources management strategies in drastic ways. And if we see, the rapid growth of export oriented resource utilization has led countries to the debt trap. And if you see the Silk Road debt trap, how Pakistan actually got into, it's a classic example actually. In the name of development, these countries indulge into or got into an agreement for Silk Road, and it brought a kind of uh, significant loss to the mm, local producers. And the massive involvement of international finance in the economic development of third world countries changes the natural resources management strategies in drastic ways. Since international finance companies are involved, your management of natural resources would be put into risk. As you said, why actually Vedanta was trying to establish establish its company in Odisha. The reason was Odisha's soil is fertile, Odisha's air is pure. We have huge amount of uh, water reservoirs. Then, so this can be exploited and can be, you know India can be a better destination for those capitalists. And but then development is not free. It comes with repercussions, consequences, and that is what happened in Chernobyl in the year 1986, when even many of us were not born. And as you see, in Chernobyl, the nuclear disaster created a massive, devastating, uh, you know, blast, crisis. And till this date, if you see, if you go to Ukraine and if you see Chernobyl nuclear station, you would come to know about how people without knowing they got into that circle and ended up with exposing their body or exposing their body to radiation, and as a result of which many people in that locality they had experienced uh, several kinds of health hazards because of this radiation. But nobody actually, if you see, nobody imagined that the failure of that nuclear reactor or blast of that nuclear reactor would bring such crisis. So the environmental crisis is one of the major problems of the development. So we'll take a break for a few minutes, then we'll start. Am I
Okay,
audible to
sir.
everyone?
Okay, sir.
We'll take a break for. Virgin, you have raised your hand. Yes, okay. So the consequences of development on ecology, if we see, basically, mm, ecology and environment, uh, tremendous impact of human ecology is well manifested in the life support systems, including air, water, land, and energy. And human population, when human population grows, there appear imbalance of food production and crisis of space, which leads to environmental pollution and unfavorably alter our surroundings. And surviving in such circumstances calls for an expansion of movement to different place. Yes, who is someone has sir, page number, please. If you go, if you see, actually, it is there in the 13.4 point. Okay. So, the what are the human activities which causes this kind of pollution? First is, if you see the water pollution, we society experiences because of industrial effluents, where actually toxic byproducts of industries are left out to, or drained to the water resources, causing tremendous pollution. Then sewage waste, like this which contains decomposable organic matter. Mm, then just a minute. Um, which this and the pathogenic agents are basically directly discharged into rivers, streams, lakes, ponds. And what happens, actually, once, especially you take the example of plastic. Now, people, those who are, especially the chemistry scholars of chemistry, those who are working on how to break the chain, especially by knowing the composition of that particular uh, chemical, but the composition of that pollutant. So they are actually adopting different strategies to conducting research on, and to know what are the components of those sewage wastes. And recently, I came across a piece in Times of India where actually found how actually a group of scientists from a central university, they were actually uh, going for this natural a natural method where actually they uh, leave the a particular type of plant species into that water resources, and it takes several months to spread. And gradually, what happens, many of the chemical pollutants those plants, they absorb, and they make they help the to the sewage water to get clean on its own. Even though that particular plant, it helps to create a kind of or to absorb certain pollutants. But then the question remains, question with regard to the pollutants which were not absorbed by those plants remain unanswered. But then, to some extent, if we see, if it cleans, then it is in a way actually like that, those kind of scientific inventions can help the for the cleaning of the water resources. Then agricultural pollutants, if you see, those who are from Odisha, you might be knowing how actually the Western Odisha belt is emerging as cancer hub. And if you see, it is mostly happening because of the excessive agricultural inputs such as fertilizers, chemicals, and the modern, especially the modern chemicals which are very much harmful to the in human body, they and animal world, how they are you know Mm, with the in the rainy seasons, they were those chemicals were drained out to the water resources and causing pollution in water resources. Then the air pollution and noise, the industrial manufacturing processes of different industries, including the steel, chemical plants, and oil refineries, fertilizer factories, and other mineral, other industries, like in the recent, such as plastic industries, and now if you see, the pharmaceutical industries, they make especially the pharmaceutical industries, they are the major contributors to the air pollution. And not only the polluted or the pollutant gas they emit, but also the noise actually they create, it also creates noise pollution. Then uh, the combustion, if you see, the industrial and domestic combustion of coal, oil, forest fires, smoke, this creates a kind of condition which is unfavorable for survival of the human beings. And the classic example, if you see, most often it comes in civil service examinations, the London smoke, where actually the city of London experienced smoke related crisis several decades back, and it had to, many people died, several others got affected because the respiratory health of a majority of the population got affected. Then automobile, then other radiation pollution, for example, if you see the Bhopal gas tragedy, the Chernobyl nuclear tragedy are the classic examples. Then soil pollution, it is mostly uh, because of the, as I said, if the proper drainage system is not followed, the proper drainage system is not developed, then it creates the industrial waste, get mixed with the soil, and it enhances, or it pollutes the soil of a particular geographical area. Then the nuclear devices, you see, if you now visit the Chernobyl area in Ukraine, you need special permission, and you cannot actually dig, or you cannot actually plow the land in that particular locality. And even if you are a researcher and if you want to go into, just enter into the radius of that particular accident area, you will be given a kind of monitoring device through which you can monitor, time to time monitor the radiation exposure your body is receiving. And from that you can actually understand how, despite of passing of several decades, still the soil is polluted because of the small, radiation particles from that nuclear accident. Then agricultural activities such as over application of inorganic manure and different chemical based pesticides and fertilizers, they ruin the soil health and makes the soil infertile, and it is also it also ruins the biodiversity of the soil, leading to degrading the soil into a kind of condition where actually micronutrients cannot, or micro species even cannot survive. Then how actually these uh, uh, crisis can be handled. And many of you are familiar with the name called Carl Polanyi. Carl Polanyi is a social scientist who provided a kind of theoretical framework, which is and his famous book is known as The Great Transformation. And in The Great Transformation, he provided how the world is experiencing development, and how the transformation not only brings or provides or gives a happy moment to celebrate every time, rather it also provides a kind of, it comes with a risk, and how that risk can be prevented, and how undesired development projects can be avoided. So he brought the concept called ecological movements, or especially the counter movements, and he said that under capitalism, how actually people they can actually stop, or people they can halt the developmental projects through their ecological concerns, and they can lead a counter movement through which they can actually stall the movement, and create a hindrance in the path of capitalist development. And if we see, uh, the example of Narmada Bachao Andolan is one of the classic examples. The Niyamgiri movement in Odisha is also one of the classic examples. And the withdrawal of private companies from the Chilika shrimp farm is also one of the examples. How actually, the counter movements or participation of people of a particular locality stalled these projects, leading to a restoration of ecology. Then we have also progressed so much when it comes to internationalization of environmental concerns, and several policy measures at the international level were brought in to arrest the negative consequences of development, specifically with regard to environment. And if we see, in the past, we several environmental summits were called upon to address the issues, and you will be seeing, if you read it carefully, you will come to know that how the countries, those who create or those who contribute to the highest carbon emission, or global, leaving highest amount of carbon footprints, they never actually agreed to be part of this agreement. You take the classic example of United States of America. This is the USA is the country which emits highest amount of carbon dioxide, but then if you see, USA did not become part of that agreement, where actually in countries like India and other countries they became part of it. But then USA did not strictly denied to be part of this treaty and agreement. And the reason was, the first condition of this agreement was, if you are becoming party or part to this agreement, you will have to disclose the amount of carbon you emit or your nation emits every year. And the participatory approach is very crucial in arresting the crisis and management of natural resources. And if you see, the joint forest management or watershed management, local self-government, panchayat raj institutions emerged as successful, institutions in managing natural resources through participatory approach. Apart from that, in the recent years, if you have seen, the local self-help groups emerged as most of the successful in managing natural resources. Apart from that, those institutions and organizations, there are also civil society organizations, those who extensively work on preserve for preserving environment. Then, mm, just a moment. So basically, now we'll be discussing about the ethno development. And ethno means, it is basically means people, and how the true development of people can be achieved. And if you see, in development theories, initially, if you see how earlier in the developmental process, uh, the economic achievements or the economic aspirations are considered to be the only criteria to achieve development. And earlier policies and plans, they rarely emphasized on the aspects of true human development. And if you see, mm, uh, the concept of human development is very recent origin, which covers not only the finance or economic part of the development, but also the aspects which are responsible for the survival of human being. It is starting from the good health to good environment to good ecology to good socio-cultural relationship to a better culture, preservance of traditional culture, or then at the end, uh, sustainable development, where actually the present generation shows concern about the future generation. And through colonialization, if you see, the countries, they experience tremendous uh, exploitation. And mm, how the colonial countries, they destroyed the local manufacturers to create a dependency of natives in the ruled countries on England. And finally, if you see in the present condition, if you see, it's a modern form of colonialism. If you see, the opening of shopping malls and creation of brands, how actually they made us depend more on the foreign countries. And now, if you see, especially boys, you might be knowing the brands like uh, Marks and Spencer. Then, for both boys and girls, if you know the clothing brands, you have Marks and Spencer, you have Levi's, you have uh, there are several brands actually. Arrow. There are many such brands, clothing brands. People then wear a Moda, several brands actually. But then how those brands comes with replacing the local manufacturers. If you go back to 40, 50 years back, how the Indian economy was largely dependent on local manufacturers, or in the survival of the Indian society with regard to clothing was largely relied on the production or products of or manufactured in rural pockets of the country. But then gradually we have uh, lost them, and this process was started in the colonial phase itself, when actually commercialization of cotton took place, as I said, how it led to. And but then we exported cotton, and in return Britain created a kind of dependency, and the people of India became dependent upon their manufactured goods. Then then if you see, uh, subsequently, uh, how the sustainable development is emerged as a kind of component for ethno development. And why actually this particular concept emerged, even though we discussed about the meaning of sustainable development, but how it emerged basically, as I discussed earlier, from the very beginning, the economic development remained, or the notion of development itself revolved around the concept economic development. And development means only the economic development or financial gains. And the overall development, or the overall socio-cultural development in the health, development of the health also. If you see physical health, mental health, those components were not included earlier in the developmental agenda, and those components were not called as the components of development. And the group of scholars believe that to make the development sustainable, there should be participatory and community based programs. And through that, you will come to know about how development is a variable. And the development of meaning, for me, the development, the kind of meaning carries, it may not be same for Vishwajivan. It may not be same for Virgin. It may not be same for X, Y, Z. The reason is the meaning of development is largely dependent upon the it is formed basically from the from the thick of environment you are living in. And you take the example, a study conducted by an anthropologist of Oxford called Felix Paddle, who conducted series of studies on in Odisha. And he was one of the leading participant of this anti Vedanta protest, and he was working in that particular locality, and he visited many schools. And during my PhD days, we invited him to deliver a lecture, and he shared a very interesting story with regard to development. And he said, I remember correctly, he said that he went into a very interior tribal pocket, and he was attending the school. He was attending certain classes in the schools, and he was observing how teachers teaching there, and what kind of teaching actually they have included, teaching method they have included, and what was the coverage actually issues they were covering in the teaching. So finally he cited an example where actually children in the early phase of joining the school, they were taught actually about English letters. For example, he cited the example of A for apple. And it generated a kind of curiosity in Felix Paddle's mind, and he asked the particular child, no, few children in that particular school, that whether they have seen apple or not. But then most of all the students, they actually denied that they have not seen apple. Similarly, he asked those parents or wards of those children whether they have seen apple or not, and when he inquired, they also did not see the apple. Similarly, he went into asking the grandparents of that particular children, school children, whether they had seen apple or not. And to his surprise, just a minute. And and to his surprise, uh, Felix Paddle found that neither the present generation they have seen the apple, or the second generation, especially the parents of the wards, they had not seen the apple, how apple looks like, how it tastes. And uh, the you know third generation, or the grandparent generation, also did not see the apple. So the question actually Felix Paddle raised, that what is the benefit of giving such kind of education which will bring no benefit to the development of that particular community? Because since two generations have not seen the apple, there is every possibility that the third generation, or the recent generation, or the present generation may not be able to see the apple in future. And even if they see the apple after 20 years or 10 years, then till then there is no point of there will be no use of the particular education which they acquired. So the basically means he did not, he suggested a very novel point, saying that if you are educating them, rather actually you educate them which bring in the subjects or areas which are very much part of their sociocultural life and economic life. And instead of bringing or citing the example of a foreign fruit like apple, you can have simply used the fruit which actually they eat. That was his argument, so that the knowledge they acquire, it can be used for them, it can be useful for them. And so this is why actually this is that is why actually uh, to make development sustainable, the participatory and community based program is must. And people must know that, what the state must know that what is the true meaning of development, and how the local population they conceived development. And the second point, actually the important point they raised about culture and development. I'll cite another important study conducted by World Bank. There is a book edited by Vijendra Rao and Michael Walton, and that book's title is Culture and Public Action. And for the first time, many of the economists, anthropologists, social scientists, political scientists, historians, they contributed immensely to this volume, going beyond their conventional domain. You see, for example, if you see, for the first time, Amartya Sen contributed a piece in that book, and you will be surprised to read the title of that article. And the title of that article is How Does Culture Matter? An economist writing an article, How Does Culture Matter? And he went into explaining why culture is important in economic development, how cultural considerations or cultural dimensions important in economic development. So I'll cite another example of how culture actually matters. You take the example of F.G. Bailey, a famous anthropologist from the West who visited Odisha, and he stayed in a village called Bisipada, and he conducted series of studies, and he published multiple books published by Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, Polity Press, and he published especially one of his important books is Caste and Economic Frontier, then Tribe, Caste and Nation. These two pieces are very important in case of understanding how culture matter in economic development. You'll be surprised to know that such a minute, the way actually he conducted this study, he stayed in that particular village for a quite longer time, and he estimated each and every economic spending of that particular household on cultural aspects. And he started his calculation with the death of an individual from the first day to the 13th day, which means every society they have a different ceremonial pattern when it comes to a different cultural pattern to follow with regard to the death of an individual. And in Odisha, in Odisha, usually we go for observing certain cultural practices in the 10th, 11th, 12th and 13th day. And he started Bailey started minutely calculating that how much money they spend in a particular death event. And he came up with the conclusion that the amount of money a particular household spends on a particular or on the death of a particular individual, it is much more than the amount they earn in the next 3 to 5 years. That means he said that on on the death of an individual, a household lost almost 5 years income. So that is why actually he wrote that Caste and Economic Frontier, and he said that how the death of an individual pushed that particular household into the perils of poverty for almost 5 years or even to a decade. They, after the death of an individual, the household members they keep on repaying the debt for almost 5 to 10 years. And you imagine he also, in a very manner, in a very scientific manner, he explained. Can you imagine if 3 to 4 individuals they die in a household? How many long years the household will take to repay the debt they spent or the expenditure they incurred in the death ceremony. So that was his approach. And basically why I cited this example, this we started with Amartya Sen, how actually the culture matter in economic development, then how actually this particular community or the cultural factors they emerged responsible, or they emerged as one of the influence influencer to economic development. Then, then endogenous development approach, which is basically, if you see, it was highlighted. If you see, there was someone called Professor Yogendra Singh of Jawaharlal Nehru University. He wrote a book called Modernization of Indian Tradition, where actually he elaboratively discussed about how, you know, uh, the development from within the culture of a particular nation, uh, you know, received immense attention in the recent decades, which he termed it as a kind of endogenous developmental approach, where actually the country's own culture is given priority. And if you see, development is endogenous because there are no front runners to be followed, and society always tries to modernize itself by following it, by keeping, or by keeping its own culture, protecting its own culture, rather than following the models of a Western country. And that is how actually, you see now the approach, in the Biksit Bharat, we have seen actually the indigenous model of development, how development can be achieved through our, you know through, keeping our culture and keeping our traditions safe. That is how actually, this Make in India program, if you see, they have used indigenous technology, indigenous science to achieve development. Then population and development, it is one of the important component of developmental history. And population and development, it is, as we know, there are different dimensions to attach. There are different dimensions attached to this particular area. And if you see, uh, population growth is always attached with, uh, you know um, economic backwardness. It is always actually aligned with economic backwardness. But then, for the first time in world history, it was China actually who proved wrong the entire, theoretical discourse, despite of its higher population growth, or highest population density. It emerged as a kind of economically successful country in the world. But then this debate started with Malthus. And if you see Malthus' book, if you see Essays on the Principle of Population, he considered, who is considered as the, pioneer, one of the pioneers of population studies. He provided a model called the model on population growth, and he said that population grows at a much faster rate, and he called this, growth as uh, geometric growth, and geometric population growth, which he calculates, multiplication uh, of that particular number. He cited the example of 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. Then, s- like that, it grows. But then, the population growth, follows the pattern of geometrical, series. And the food production, on the other hand, grows arithmetically, which means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But then his concern was, when population grows and the food production remains or follows the arithmetic growth pattern, then the produced foods may not be sufficient, or not fulfill the may not fulfill the requirement of the uh, growing uh, population, and as a result of which uh, poverty will appear. That is why actually Malthus said uh, population growth leads to poverty, and he cited several examples of several countries, and he also differentiated the depopulation rather than overpopulation, and he said that how population growth can contribute to um, poverty, but then his uh, idea of or his theory on population growth was challenged by many, and if you see, one among the pioneers who actually criticized or who was not in agreement with Malthus was mm, just a minute, just a second. So basically, Marx challenged the notion of Malthus provided by Malthus, and he said that Malthus did not understand the notion of uh, crisis or with regard to the production crisis, and he said that it is the inherent nature of capitalism which brings crisis. It is not the it is not the outcome of population growth, and his analysis challenge the notion of challenge the Malthusian notion of population growth actually, where Malthus said that there will be pressure on the production, there will be pressure on the means of production such as land and other assets which are responsible for feeding the people. On the contrary, Marx brought in a kind of interesting point, saying that with the growing population there will be growth in the production, and capitalism will teach the population how to produce more, and for their own survival people will produce more, and that is what actually experienced. You imagine actually with the kind of production, quantum jump in production of food grains India experienced. You take the example of Odisha being a food deficit state, with backward pockets of many of the tribal hinterlands, then unirrigated tract of land. But then gradually, how Odisha emerged as a kind of food surplus state. You take the example how Odisha consecutively for 3 years between 2000 for 13 and 17, how Odisha continuously owned the Krishi Karman Award for emerging as one of the leading food grain producer state in the country. One, being a one of the poorest state, emerging as a kind of leading food grain producer countries, that this achievement is commendable. And how we could produce that, it is because of the population pressure. And since the population grew rapidly and the people were the state wanted more food grains to feed them, The sole reason is that is why actually they brought in all sorts of policies, and also the people, peasants and farmers, they adopted new technologies, seed technology, crop technology, to bring in or to enhance the production. That is why actually in case of paddy production, Odisha experienced quantum jump. It is a kind of very one of the best examples in the contemporary times you can actually cite. And then uh, mm, the new Malthusian theories, they actually they also brought in a kind, or we can say they provided a new perspective through which they can actually control the population growth, and in a way they can prevent the pressure on the land, or the prevent on the pressure on the means of production. And they said that birth control can be one of the impactful instrument through which actually they can uh, mm, control overpopulation. And uh, this this new Malthusian approach basically diverted the debate on population from issues of poverty and unequal access to resources to birth control and if you see the unequal distribution of resources emerged as a kind of key area of policy discussion after Marxist joined this debate, and they challenged the Malthusian notion. And mm, then just ah, then the politics of population control, if we see environment and gender aspect, how if you see in India, the when our the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister, how actually the population control, arbitrary population control policy came into force, and those propagandas, public propagandas. If you remember correctly, if you see the earlier newspapers of 1960s, early 70s, if you see the agendas like हम दो हमारे दो, if you remember correctly, ଯେମିତି in Odia we call it as ଆମେ ଦୁଇ ଆମର ଦୁଇ, during that time, those who have seen even the advertisements in Doordarshan, how actually population control emerged as a kind of major agenda in the context of development. And uh, and always this gender component attracted a kind of harsh debate between the policymakers, and the family planning with regard to women emerged as a kind of key you know debatable area. And the this particular aspect was debated, challenged, and many of the feminists actually they criticized this particular approach for being biased towards particular gender. And this position of the government was largely criticized, and many uh, you know mm, the ecologist or the environmentalist, basically, if you see, they were also critical of population growth. They said that because of high population growth, the people have started using pesticides, chemical fertilizers, hybrid seeds, which ruined the natural fabric of soil health, and caused environmental destruction, and responsible for degradation of biodiversity. And many of the plant species, if you see, varieties have already we have already lost. The kind of types of paddy earlier rural India, rural Odisha content, it is almost more than 70%, I think, we have lost. Now you see, you will rarely see actually the traditional varieties of rice, traditional varieties of paddy. You will see one, two varieties which looks very polished, which looks white, which is easy to cook. And we are now, there is no traditional or conventional variety of seed farmers are cultivating. Everyone is cultivating these high yielding varieties which are genetically modified, and these are all modified varieties of seeds, and in a way it is putting pressure on the biodiversity as well as the agricultural ecology, where actually many of the traditional varieties, they lost their ground. They are already uh, and few of them are also already in the verge of extinction. And the religious factors, as we know, the controversy emerged that certain religions, they do not follow the population control method. They do not adopt population control method. They do not use contraceptives. They do not use the advanced medical technologies or scientific inventions to uh, use them. They do not use them for population control, and it led to a kind of controversy between uh, different regions. Then India's development experience, if you see, earlier India was criticized being one of the most populous country, but then now, if you, the recent trend, if you see how the policymakers, they are encouraging people not to go for population control, rather actually at least to have one or two children, because the kind of crisis of working population is the or the younger generation, the kind of problem countries like Japan encountering in its generational renewal, India might experience in the few decades. That is why actually most of the demographers, they anticipate. So in case of China now, if you see the average age of Chinese countryside, it is or the Chinese nation, it is increasing, and it shows that the birth rate tremendously declined when actually the average age of the population is increasing, which basically it means that the birth rate is declining tremendously, and the death rate is, or the mortality rate, the mortality rate is also declining, which means people are growing older, and new people, there is less number of children, or there is less number of younger generation taking over, which means there is a generational gap is being created, and there is high possibility of many of the households losing be in with many of the households will be having problems in the generational renewal, and They are in the last feet. So this problem can be avoided now. If you see the recent years, how many of the policymakers they are suggesting for no at least going for one or two children so that India may not fall into the category of Japan or China. And recently, you must have come across the Russian government's policy where actually they are allowing the couple or the husband and wife, those who are working in the same workplace, to have a kind of private place, which means basically they are encouraging the population growth, and which shows that minimum, there should be a balance between the population growth and development. And if the population growth rate declines tremendously also, it will bring no benefit or no development to the country. If it increases rapidly also, it will be a problem for the nation. So India brought a number of policies with regard to, sometimes it is to control the family planning, sometimes to, in the recent years, if you see, so soon they will be going, bringing in policies to enhance the population growth. So the states, different states have also came up with different, policy measures to control the population, like the camp approach for family planning. Then they also created awareness programs to adopt contraceptives, and mm, not going for female ferticide. So these kind of policies, policy measures government adopted time to time to uh, keep an eye or to monitor the population growth in India. So population is, if you see, is an important component of development. It's cannot be simply is argued or said that population growth will bring poverty. Rather, it can be a blessing if it is the workforce or the working population can be utilized efficiently and managed efficiently. So the population decline in population growth also can cause tremendous difficulties for our hindrances in achieving better economic growth, as it is happening in the context of Japan, where actually many of the villages are turning day by day, ghost villages, where actually people are gradually, generations are getting, there is a problem of generational renewal. So, with this, we'll conclude today's class. Uh, if you have any doubt, you can ask me now, or we'll conclude the class.
Share your contact number.
Contact number.
Sir.
Uh, I'll share my email ID. You can write to me through email. It is there in the chat box, or else simply you can visit Utkal University's website, Vishwajivan. Okay, Department of Sociology. They have there. I have also another alternative email ID, and you can contact me. I'll also give my phone number. But you try to contact me through email. That will be convenient because most of the time we might be in I might be in meetings or in classes. I might miss your call. Okay. So if you can write me through email, so that if not today, tomorrow I can respond at least. You are getting my point?
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So then we'll conclude today's class. We'll meet again tomorrow. I think we don't have class. The next class will be on 11th. Okay. Do you have the schedule, Vishwajivan? I
Yes,
think
sir.
I have the schedule. Can you just check whether I have class on 11th? 10th? No, it is on 11th. The next class is on 11th. Okay. Yes, sir. Virgin said yes. No, I don't have. I have the schedule actually. It is not there. 10th, I
Class
don't
is
have.
on, sir, next class is on 11th, then 14th, 15th, and 16th.
14th, 15th, and 16th. Uh, okay. I'll see 14th class. I might miss. I'll contact actually. I'll let you know. 10th, I'll be traveling. So I'll just. You'll be updated, okay? In case of any change in the schedule, you will be updated.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm disconnecting the call now. We'll meet again on 11th.